Good evening. This is John Haller. We're trying to do a midweek prophecy update. So I would appreciate if somebody would sort of indicate in the comments where how things are going and if the sound is okay. And I'm trying to get some of my things set up here. Wow, what a bunch of stuff that we need to talk about and see that it was there's just a lot going on. And I see somebody said that they watch Monkey Works and Tom Hughes. I'll have some comments on that. Sort of remind me in the comments. And if you have a question, I'll try to take questions, but understand I've got like 5 screens, camera, microphone, and everything trying to I've got just too many things going on here. So I try to monitor comments. And so question, do all caps, type everything in all caps. I won't accuse you of yelling at me. And I don't even really know where to begin. So let me, hang on a second here. I'm trying to get to my share screen button on my StreamYard browser. And let's see. There we go. So I'm going to use the screen and here we go. So this is just this kind of a joke. One of my Weisenheimer friends sent me this and said, gee, maybe this should be the brand for your prophecy update. And so very funny, whoever that was that sent that. I don't even remember, but I thought it was very clever. Where do I start? Let me go here. I've got a bunch of browser windows open. And now I'm not seeing any of those. Where did they all go? Hang on here. Nope. Well, isn't that just perfect? I had all these browser windows open that I was going to share with you. And of course, now all of those browser windows are gone. Oh, goodness. Well, let me see if I can get them back. Sorry about this, folks. Best laid plans. Okay, so let's start. And I'll just try to go through. I have tons of notes, tons of things to talk about. And maybe we'll do it we'll do it sort of classic style, no slides or anything like that. But I do have some that we need to look at to go over. So let me talk about some of the, let's talk about the food situation first. So here is an article from AgWeb, and this is kind of an interesting article. We are in a major food crisis in the world. I don't know if you're following food or not, but I went and bought some clam chowder tonight at Costco. It's from a restaurant called Ivar's Acres of Clams based in Seattle. We absolutely love their clam chowder. So I bought it. It was $17 for 2 24-ounce things. It used to be $12. It's now $17. I'm seeing food price increases like this all over the place. In fact, yesterday, I played in a golf outing. It's the Elyria Country Club Clam Bake. And some of you people who are Cleveland TV fans, you'll remember Big Chuck and Little John from Channel 8. Little John was at the outing, and he was sitting at the table next to me at dinner. So well, he was standing mostly because he's he's very tiny and short, but he's a Cleveland personality, very interesting guy. On the way home, I was going to get gas. So I checked my gas app, and last week I bought gas for $2.69 for regular at a local station, at a Sheetz station. The Sheetz station here, it was now $3.15. It was up almost 50 cents just from last week. So I thought, well, I'll just get it tomorrow. I have to go out and it's late and I'm tired. So I didn't get it. I went to get it today, $3.15 yesterday, $3.69 a gallon today. It's interesting. This kind of came up at the Peter Doocy from Fox brought it up with Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, and he said, hey, President Biden said he was responsible for the gas prices going down. Is he responsible for the gas prices going up? And Karine Jean-Pierre said, well, Peter, it's more nuanced than that. And then just dropped it like she'd answered the question. That person, she is incompetent and she is a stone cold liar. It is, I don't know where they get these people. I mean, I wish we could bring back Jen Psaki burger. I enjoyed those days. So prices are up across the board. Food, gas. I know there's problems with rent in some places. There's some places where housing prices are falling, rents are falling, but people can't afford them. And then I see somebody who works for Amazon on my Facebook, one of my Facebook friends, and she says, wow, I got a 25-cent an hour raise. Like that didn't even cover the amount of the increase from yesterday to today in 1 gallon of gas. $3.15 last night, less than 24 hours later at the same station, $3.69. I take it back. It was $3.66 because I get 3 cents off with my app. Thank goodness for that. Now I can afford to, buy a little tiny thing of clam chowder. But here, this is from AgWeb. And by the way, yesterday at the golf outing, I actually sat next to a farmer. And I asked him, how's it going? I mean, what's your crop look like this year? And he goes, I've got soybeans and corn. The soybeans, I said, the best I've ever seen. And prices are up, and I'm glad I planted soybeans. Corn doesn't look very good. Not going to have a good year on corn. Soybeans, he can make some money per acre based on how much it's selling per bushel. And he gets so many bushels per acre. I can't remember the exact numbers, but I asked him, I said, what are your input costs? He said, last year it would cost me about $150 per acre, for fertilizer and weed killer and those type of things. This year, $300, but he expects it to go to $600 next year. This is just a crazy time. So this is an AgWeb article. I think I found this on Ice Age Farmer. Ice Age Farmer is a guy that I follow on Telegram. I do post a little on Telegram, and some people are trying to help me set up a separate channel. And so when that happens, I'm going to post more on Telegram. So you can I hate to put this up like this, but because this will show you some of the people that I follow. Let me try to get this over here to this other window. So, and by the way, if you see people that I follow here, don't assume that I endorse everything that they say, because I see some at the top that I don't. I mean, I follow. Here's Amir Sarfati and Alex Berenson, and some of these people are not Christians and everything. Jerry, she's a good friend. Jerusalem Jane. Abu Ali Express, he writes a lot about things in the Middle East. Here's a guy I follow, Ice Age Farmer, and I think this is where I got the article. Yeah, here's where I got the article about the food wars going on. This one right here, you can kind of see the picture that I'm circling with my little pointer. And what's happening, like in Brazil, which is one of the major agriculture producing countries in the world, the farmers, let me go back here to my article. Hang on a second. I don't want to do that. So I have to. I love Apple, but I don't like the way you have to manage Windows sometimes. I actually think Windows was better at managing Windows. So Brazilian crushers halt operations. Look at what this article says. Between 8 and 10 Brazilian soybean processors have temporarily halted operations as crushing margins. Actually, the crushing margins are crushing them. That's an interesting play on words. Turn negative, reflecting weak domestic demand for biodiesel and high vegetable oil inventories at production sites. What this means in a lot of companies, countries are having problems with managing inventory because of the bad economy. People are just not buying things. And so inventories are building up. And here's a case where it's costing them more. Everything's negative. Remember last year when we had an oversupply of oil for a short period of time, the price of oil actually went negative for a week, which meant that theoretically they would pay you to buy the oil, to get the oil. And they were trying to use the pipelines as storage facilities because storage facilities were completely full because nobody was buying oil. Nobody was going anywhere because of the restrictions that came in from Charlie Vector 019er. Okay, so imagine that oil problem. And the oil facility, one of the big major oil transit facilities is in Cushing, Oklahoma. Go look it up on Google Earth and you'll see it's just giant oil tankers, farms everywhere. It's like farms dotting the landscape. So here's all these. They don't have any storage facilities. So the people who were selling oil were trying to use the pipelines as a storage facility. So they had to put in price controls and everything. It's just absolutely insane. And so imagine that oil problem happening in sector after sector after sector in the economy, and you have a major problem. I do not know where all this is going. I subscribe to some different financial investment newsletters, and to be honest with you, the advice is always confusing. I never know exactly what to do. I do know I'm confident that I'm probably going to make the wrong decision. It's very daunting. So the guy that I probably follow the most closely, he thinks that everything's crashing. Everything is going to crash. We're not near the bottom yet. He thinks the Dow will go below 20,000. It was up around 40,000 not too long ago. He thinks it's maybe 15,000 is the bottom. He's also advising that you buy some crypto at the bottom, and he thinks the bottom in crypto is coming, but then there's some alternate coin investments. It's very complicated. It's almost impossible to follow, but understand that the markets are incredible turmoil everywhere you look. On the oil side, there's an oversupply of natural gas right now. Well, there's a need for gas, but there's kind of an oversupply, but there's an oversupply in oil. So to control the price of oil and to get more revenue, Saudi Arabia came out and announced that they were going to cut their oil production by about 10%. And that's an OPEC decision. That would be the oil producing, exporting countries. It includes Russia, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Iran. They're all part of OPEC, and they're going to cut production so the price will go up so they'll get more revenue. And we know that if you look at the Saudis, for example, Crown Prince and now Prime Minister Mohammed bin Salman has big plans. He has a thing called Vision 2030. There's that 2030 date again. He wants to build the city of Neom, which is this 1,500 foot high walls for over 100 miles through the desert, a thing called the Line. It'll be about 700 feet from wall to wall. They'll have golf courses, parks, everything will be self-contained. I've shown you a lot of slides and pictures about that. And it has this very visual connection to the hanging gardens of Babylon that were so famous at the time of Nebuchadnezzar, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. And we know that another one of the wonders of the ancient world were the pyramids. And so when Mohammed bin Salman is interviewed about Neom, he says, listen, I want to build my pyramids. In other words, I want to be remembered thousands of years into the future. And it's just kind of interesting, the biblical imagery and everything that people use that seem to relate to things that we know are coming in the end times. So they're cutting the price of oil, or cutting the production to raise the price of oil. But I'm telling you is that from yesterday to today, 50-cent increase in the price of a gallon of gas here in the Columbus, Ohio area at the Sheetz station that I go to regularly. It's just it's unbelievable. We have this hurricane, the situation down in Florida. I have some friends that have a home and then some rental homes in Fort Myers. I don't think they'd mind. You don't know who they are. One house is gone, one of the rental homes. The other two are pretty damaged, but look like they might be able to be repaired. They have another home that they live in part of the year in Fort Myers Beach. But I just saw a news report today that Fort Myers Beach will likely be uninhabitable for a year. It's effectively destroyed as a community for some time. I mean, it's one of these things when you see the damage there and understand what it takes to rebuild. It's one of these things like when you're my age, approaching 70 years old, you're wondering, like, is this going to ever come back? This may not come back in my lifetime. But we could say that about a lot of things. A lot of things aren't coming back in our lifetimes, I think, if we're at the point on the prophetic timeline that I think we are. Sanibel Island is uninhabitable, the mayor of Sanibel Island said, for the foreseeable future. I think there are 5,500 people or so, 7,500 people that lived out on Sanibel. The bridge is out. The causeway's destroyed in a few places. There's another place called Pine Island. The causeway's pretty much destroyed. I just heard from some friends who live in the Port Charlotte area, Northport. They said they're okay, but they had damage to the roofs. But I want to give credit where credit is due. You're going to see a lot of negativity about Governor Ron DeSantis, mainly because of his conservative positions on a lot of things. But understand that they had marshaled they probably made some mistakes in the way they handled the hurricane and evacuation orders, but they didn't know where this thing was going to hit. And it turned quite significantly. I mean, from where it hit around Port Charlotte to Tampa, where they said it was going to hit, that's at least an hour and a half drive. So they don't know. And so, and then the hard part about evacuating in Florida was the whole state was really under a watch. And where do you go? So, but they have restored the power to they're approaching 90% power restoration of people that people had lost power. 90% of it's back. That's a phenomenal number in less than a week. And one of the utility guys said today that if people are able to receive power, in other words, their house isn't destroyed and they still have wires and stuff going to their house, they will likely have all the power restored in Florida by Friday of this week. That's like a modern miracle. So you got to give credit to Governor DeSantis and the emergency people in Florida. They're heading this up. But you're going to see, if you turn on MSNBC, you'll see all this stuff about, oh, look how terrible it is. He's doing a terrible job. And it's just not true. It's all just a bunch of propaganda. It's an amazing story. So props to Governor DeSantis for doing that. So we covered a little bit about the food situation. We covered the hurricane, oil, gas prices. So now let me turn to one thing, and I need to get my slide up for this. Give me 1 second. And I may just not do a full screen slide. as I collect these things over the week, you can imagine by the time I get to Sunday, I've got like 400 or 500 slides in my slide deck. And there are a couple things I want to cover. So here is this one. And let me see if I can get this here without too much. I don't want to make it full screen because then it takes away my ability to. Okay, I think you can see that. So this is this. Let me get this out of there. So this is the gas field. Of course, here's Haifa, Nahariya. This is the Lebanon-Israel border here, just north of Nahariya. This area is heavily Hezbollah controlled, although they have a significant Hamas presence also in southern Lebanon. Here's Beirut. Here's Mount Hermon. And if you go here, you see the Golan Heights. A lot of you who've been to Israel have been there to the Golan Heights overlooking this no man's lair near Kenitra. And if you go from here, you go about 30 miles, you're in Damascus. So that'll give you some idea as to how close all of these things are. So Israel and Lebanon, which when you say Lebanon, you might as well just say, oh, you mean Hamas. I mean, not Hamas, Hezbollah, because Hezbollah effectively controls the Lebanese government. And so they've been negotiating for over 10 years. They've been negotiating about where is the border. So under international law, what you do is you take the border and the land border, and you extend it out into the ocean. And there's rules for how you do this. And there are a couple buoys that were put here on the border there north of Nahariya. And now that's a big deal. And Hezbollah never mentioned that. Now, if you look over here to the left of the picture, you see this little corner, that's Cyprus. So these countries sometimes negotiate, and there's international law rules to determine who gets what, the law of the sea. The problem is, like Lebanon, Israel, virtually none of these countries have signed on to the law of the sea. So the result is that, for example, here's a picture. So you see Cyprus, and you see Cyprus divided into a southern zone and a north zone. The north zone is Turkish controlled. There was a civil war many years ago. Turkey has effectively controlled that part of the island. And there were some resorts there, and they were completely shut down. They were ghost towns, but a guy who runs Turkey, we've talked about him a little bit. His name is Erdogan. And Erdogan comes into Cyprus, and there's rich gas here all over the Eastern Mediterranean. Egypt has fields. Israel has fields. And then there's areas off the coast of Lebanon, off the coast of Cyprus. Now, Turkey has used a doctrine called their blue water doctrine to try to extend out their claim to areas of the Eastern Mediterranean. And there was a proposal a number of years ago. There was an agreement signed a few years back for what we call the East Med pipeline. And the East Med pipeline would go from Israel to Cyprus, and then it was going to go over here to Crete. And then from Crete, it would go up to Greece. That pipeline, they were talking about getting it financed and everything. And then in December of 2021 and January of this year, the United States, through our Secretary of the Department of State's expert on oil and gas, Amos Hochstein, withdrew their support. They said, look, nobody's going to support. Now, remind you, this is like less than 2 months before Russia invades Ukraine and completely upsets the world gas markets. So Hochstein said, nobody's going to we're getting away from hydrocarbons. We don't need gas. We're going to have solar and wind, and they're going to replace everything, and everybody's going to have an electric car, and we won't need nuclear power, and we won't need carbon-based generate electricity generating facilities like coal and gas, and then we're going to get away from all that, and we're all going to have a job, and we're going to have a guaranteed income, and we're all going to sip, go down to the coffee shop and sip lattes, and then go to the museum and look at things every day. I mean, this is the European dream that they're trying to push everywhere in the world, and it's a nightmare. It's a dystopian nightmare. So Turkey, with their blue water doctrine, they what they wanted was, they have all kinds of pipelines. I think on Sunday I had a graphic that I put up that showed that Turkey had a tremendous amount of the pipelines transited Turkey. I don't think I have it in this presentation. There's pipelines all over, and in fact, now that Russia shut off the Ukrainian pipelines, there's been destruction of the Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 pipelines, pretty much. That really only leaves Turkey. So Turkey has a big economic interest in that. And what Erdogan wants, he's making nice with Israel now, because he really doesn't care about that. He needs money, he needs cash, their economy's bad. So he wants Israel to build a pipeline up here to Turkey, and then they can just transit across Turkey, into Europe, and the Israeli gas can reach Europe to replace the Russian gas. But they don't have the pipeline yet, so they have to build a pipeline to Turkey. The East Med pipeline, that's going to take 5 years at least to build. The cost would be at least $10 billion. And when we talk about Nord Stream and the difficulties of putting together Nord Stream cost billions of dollars. It took many years to build, both Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2. Nord Stream 1's been online for about 12 years, I think, pumping gas. So I'm going to talk about some of the logistical aspects in just a moment. If you remember, the Nord Stream pipelines that are damaged are about 260 feet below the surface of the Baltic Sea. Here in the Mediterranean, between Crete and Cyprus, those pipelines that they put in would have to be over 9,000 feet below the surface of the ocean. This is a very technically difficult thing. I mean, it took Russia and its partners, some of the European partners who are experienced in building pipelines, years and years to build Nord Stream 1 and 2. So this is not going to be an easy thing for Israel to get its gas from these gas fields to Europe. It is, for lack of a better term, it is a bit of a pipe dream. It is technically very challenging. So what's also been challenging is Israel has recently discovered gas in this field here called the Karish field. That means shark. They also have other gas fields. One of these is called Leviathan. They use these are Hebrew names that they use. And then there's another one, and I can't remember the name of this field right here. But so starting about 10, 11, 12 years ago, Israel and Lebanon started negotiating, like, okay, where should the border be? So what Israel did was, Lebanon had entered into an agreement with Cyprus to demarcate their borders. Where did their borders go? So when they demarcated their southern border, Israel came in and said, hey, you know what? We can live with that border. We can live with that. Well, then Lebanon said, oh, no, wait a minute. You're this gas field here. We're entitled to more of this gas field than you think we are. So we want this line 23. So for years, and they never really formalized that, but they just said line 23 is the line. So an American guy named Hoff came in and wanted to enter into a compromise and said, well, listen, guys, why don't we split the difference? Instead of the Israel line here or the Lebanon line here, let's do this line here in the middle. And the result of that would be that Lebanon would get, with this field that crossed the border, Lebanon would get about 60% of that, Israel 40%. And I think Israel was willing to go along with that. But then what happened? They found gas in the Karish field. Well, and they brought this big ship in. It's called an FPSO, something about petroleum petroleum producing ship. Remember, they brought it up through the Suez Canal. I showed you the videos of that. And they put it there, and they were supposed to start pumping gas and some oil, but mainly gas, September 1st. Well, that didn't come. That came and went. Back in July, Hezbollah sent some drones out towards this ship, sort of as a warning message. They weren't really armed. Israel took them out. But Hezbollah is like saying, and Nasrallah does a speech at least every week, if not two, discussing this issue. And they're like, this is our gas. If you do anything to take our gas, we're coming after you. So that's the situation. So what happened was that over the past about 24 hours, there has been apparently an agreement. Now, Lapid is the prime minister, but he's a caretaker. The elections are coming up in about 4 or 5 weeks. I think they're November 7th. And if you remember my interview with General Vivi a week ago, last Wednesday, Tom Hughes and I interviewed him, and he said, listen, he thought that the election was going to go towards the right in the political structure of Israel, that some of the left-wing parties had worn out their welcome and they may not even meet the threshold. You have to get enough votes to get 4 representatives or 4 mandates in the Knesset. 120 members of the Knesset, the parliament, and whoever can form a coalition with 61 will be the prime minister. And this has been very difficult. This is I think the 5th election in 3 years. So Lapid is in a caretaker government, and the caretaker defense minister is Danny Gantz. Danny Gantz was going to be he was the prime minister in waiting under the last coalition where Netanyahu was prime minister. But that government fell apart, and Gantz never got to be prime minister. So in this one, they got a new coalition. Naftali Bennett was the prime minister. And then right near the end of the time that his government started to fail, that government started to fail. So Lapid was supposed to succeed him. Bennett said he was resigning, but then he sort of stuck around as the assistant prime minister. And now Lapid is the caretaker prime minister till November or whenever the new government gets sworn in. But it's a caretaker government. And what they've been doing is they've been negotiating in secret on a lot of these issues. It's been an unbelievable thing to watch. Let me get where is well, I don't want to click on that one. So here's an article by Caroline Glick that she published today. And she talked about a little bit this week on our podcast. So if you go to YouTube, type in JNS Caroline Glick for Jewish News Syndicate, JNS, they have a channel. Click on videos and you'll see her recent video that's up on her YouTube channel. And she is, let's see if I can pull this up here. And like I said, if anything goes wrong, somebody can try to call my wife and she'll come down and tell me that I sound like she did last week. I sound like I'm talking from the drive-thru at McDonald's. I don't know how she would know that. She's only ever on my side of the speaker. Unless maybe she's got a part-time job there. I don't know. Anyway, so Caroline has this phenomenal article talking about Israel's devastating capitulation to Hezbollah. The negotiations have been conducted largely in secret. I don't know that the agreement is fully in place right now, that there's been an agreement that's been reached. There's still some back and forth going. Amos Hochstein is over there and he's shuttling back and forth. But by most measures, and Netanyahu put up a video, Caroline talked about it on her weekly podcast that was published today, I think today. Maybe last night, because today I think is Yom Kippur. So she wouldn't broadcast on Yom Kippur. But anyway, it looks like Israel, they don't even get a demarcated border that's like agreed border. So Hezbollah can still come back. So what Hezbollah did during this whole process was that they went to so when they discovered gas in Karish, then Lebanon, Hezbollah, whatever, came in and said, "Oh no, it's line 29 because part of this half of this Karish field is ours." And in literally line 29, we get all of this other field. Well, and so they use that as a negotiating play. They take this extreme position, and these lefties that are running the Israeli government just completely capitulated to them. It's to say that it's unbelievable. I mean, look at what some of these said. Given that Hezbollah rejects Israel's right to exist, Hezbollah-controlled Lebanon surprised no one when it immediately objected to Israel's map, even though it was based on Lebanon's own demarcation. So Lebanon had come in, and they had designated this line that Israel took. They got from Hezbollah-controlled government. That's what they had agreed to in their negotiations over the gas borderlines, the borderlines in the ocean when they were negotiating with Cyprus. But then they came in, they had line 23, then they went to line 29. And all they want to do is they want to kind of go back to something like this. So essentially, I don't know that Israel is getting anything out of this. Look at Caroline's article again. It says Lebanon demanded eight. Let's see. I want to get down here to the. Okay, so here she goes. Lapid, Gantz, and their allies portrayed the deal as a diplomatic and strategic masterstroke. By surrendering to all of Hezbollah-controlled Lebanon's 12-year-old demands, they brag that Israel has secured its ability to develop Karish. In other words, they're bragging that they're signing a protection deal with Hezbollah in exchange for 854 square kilometers of sovereign Israeli waters. They believe that Hezbollah will permit us to exploit our natural resources, at least until Nasrallah decides to renew his threats and demands. She's exactly right. This is the way the Iranians negotiate, and Iran is behind this. And the way that it looks like this, here she goes. Aside from the Israeli media, no one has been buying their line. On Monday morning, former U.S. Ambassador David Friedman tweeted incredulously, "We spent years trying to broker a deal between Israel and Lebanon on the disputed maritime gas fields. Got very close with proposed splits of 55-60% for Lebanon and 45 to 40% for Israel. No one then imagined 100% to Lebanon and 0% to Israel. Would love to understand how we got here." Well, David Friedman, Ambassador Friedman, I do respect you. I understand your love for Israel. I had cases with attorneys in your firm. They were always top notch. They were superb lawyers. And so I can see that they learned from you. So here's my contribution to this. They hired a bunch of stupid lefties to run the Israeli government. And they're running the government into the ground, just like the Biden administration is running the United States into the ground. We're doing the exact same. The parallels between Israel and the United States and the way things are going and things are being controlled is just absolutely shocking. I mean, we see this, I'm going to go out on a limb, the fake investigations against Netanyahu to effectively remove him from public life. They sound very much like other fake investigations to remove politicians in the United States and people who support him from public life. This is totally out of control. We are capitulating to Iran in the negotiations over the JCPOA in such a way that the Iranians could realize between now and 2030 additional revenues of somewhere around $500 billion to $1 trillion. What do you think they're going to do with that money? And in this case, and I believe that Caroline's analysis is 100% correct, this deal with Hezbollah, Israel gets nothing. Hezbollah gets this. They can continue to make threats about the border, and they're going to get somewhere around $20 billion. What does that mean? That means that Iran doesn't have to give them $20 billion to do their mischief. They have that money freed up to do whatever they want. and Iran's going to get maybe $1 trillion out of the new deals that the Biden administration wants to put in place. This is just the most egregious, moronic negotiating. And so the similarities between what's going on between Israel and the United States, it goes even further. So we have the things with the leadership, the political disputes. The left is pushing a lot of the same type of agenda that they're pushing here in the United States with regard to children. I could go on and on and on about this. Literally, folks, this could be 12 hours of me just ranting. Well, not ranting, but sharing facts with you that might result in my ranting. But it's absolutely crazy. I'll give you an example. At the beginning of Caroline's podcast that she published last night, she talks about it's about 12 minutes. Go listen to it. It's great commentary. And what she says is what they're doing in Israel, a new TV channel came online in Israel back about December, Channel 14. And I get the tweets from there. We have to translate them from Hebrew, but Caroline's on there a lot. So are a lot of other conservatives or right-leaning people in Israel. And the left in Israel, through their corrupt legal system, which is the same corrupt legal system that we've developed in this country, they've weaponized the law against people. They are now, there's been a proposal, I think it came from Lapid's party, to shut down Channel 14. Why? Because they're getting too close to the truth, and people and their audience now is as big as the state-controlled TV in Israel. So we got to shut down the conservatives. What are they doing here? They're trying to shut us down left and right everywhere. There's been Tom Fitton at Judicial Watch and others have come out with a lot of documentation that the government in Facebook, Google, YouTube, Twitter and stuff, they communicate back and forth. Hey, take down this site. We think it's misinformation. And a lot of this comes from these guys that have been trained at the World Economic Forum Young Leadership Summit. Friday, and I'll play it Sunday, Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, spoke at the United Nations General Assembly. And what did she talk about? She said, well, we're all for free speech and everything, but the quotes are amazing. But as leaders, we're leaders and we have to set a very strong example and a high bar. So we need to control misinformation, to which one article I read, I don't remember where it was, said, what does misinformation even mean? Is that even really a word? They've made this up, but she says we need to control this. And remember, you've seen the clip. I've played it a couple of times. Jacinda Ardern, back during the thing that we had going on with the Charlie Vector 019er, she said, listen, we, the government of New Zealand, to the people in New Zealand, we will be your sole source of information. Don't trust anybody else. We are the ones with the truth. And they want to claim that Christians are dogmatic because we claim that we have the truth. It's absolutely amazing. And she's a young leadership summit, World Economic Forum graduate. And on September 20th, I don't know if she's been in New York all this time. I hope we haven't let her hang around our country for this long. I don't know how many people has she transmitted, what to. But she's on September 20th in New York with another graduate of the Young Leadership Forum from the World Economic Forum, a guy named Emmanuel Macron. Emmanuel Macron was there, and they were talking about, and I'll show you some of the clips on Sunday, about how we need to control misinformation. This is happening everywhere, but the two most prominent places it seems to be happening are Israel and the United States. There just seems to be this uncanny parallels going on. So go read Caroline's article. This is a horrendous, awful deal. You can see it if you want to read it in Hebrew. Um, you can go to here's Israel Hayom, and they have a big front page article here. And like this guy, his name is Gideon Sar. He's one of the opposition parties. I think he used to be in Likud, and he got upset. He just got tired of Netanyahu, but now he's kind of gone completely the other way. And he's like, we need to control the information on this. That's why we can't make this public. And they're like, they don't even know if the Knesset should vote on this, but who knows if they're going to do this. So I'm just telling you, this thing is, so this is Israel Hayom newspaper from today. It means Israel Today. And you can go and you can get this article that talks about this deal. It's shameful. It's disgusting. It does nothing for Israel. Now, I want you to put this in the prophetic context. So one of the beliefs of the end times is that there will be this covenant. Now, I'm not 100% sure that this is the way that works out, but I'm going to talk about it like I'm sure that this is the way it's going to work out. And one of the things that everybody discusses is it a two-state solution? Is that the deal? And I've talked a lot recently about the Hashemite Kingdom of Palestine proposal that came out from the Soviets or from the Saudis. Now, that's not gotten a lot of traction. There's one guy named David Singer. You can look him up at Arutz Shiva. He's written a number of articles, and he's like the leading, maybe the lone advocate for this Hashemite Kingdom of Palestine. I don't know that it's going to work. If you listen to General Miravivi's interview with me last week, me and Tom Hughes, or Tom Hughes and I, he said that, one of the main problems that he thinks he sees coming is not necessarily a two-state solution, but there will be a war among the clans in the Palestinians. The Palestinians are tribal people. They're Arabs. And so there's a coming conflict with them. And you see that every day on the newspaper, that the clans are fighting each other, and Israel's having to send its security forces in there, and there's a lot of acts of terror. Everything is just, in fact, here's an article from my friend. Where'd my mouse go? Where's my cursor? There it is. Here's a website I would highly recommend that you go to. My friend Bill Koenig. He is so he's got an article here that the Israeli forces from Times of Israel prepare to shut down for Yom Kippur as security forces remain on high alert. So go to Koenig. You can subscribe to his newsletter. It's like $1 a week. And he tracks the news very well. We've been friends for 20 years or more. And so here he's linked to Caroline's article also. So, okay, so now I'm gonna do something that's probably gonna make everybody really upset. So I'm gonna go here to my presentation. So, look, I respect all of my friends who also engage in Bible prophecy. So if I remember to do it, I'll talk. Tom Hughes and Monkey Works did a thing, and Monkey Works thinks that the United States bombed or blew up or destroyed the Nord Stream pipeline. I kind of agree with it. I kind of don't. I don't think we know for sure yet, but Monkey Works, we'll say, you can watch this video, does a great job of showing the plane thing and the timing and all that. And it's a fairly compelling case. But I'll mention that before we leave tonight, because I think I feel like I've gone 5 minutes based on what I have. So let me do this. So I'm going to blow this up just a little bit. Oops. Okay. So as this is developed, the speculation, the analysis of a lot of people in the Bible prophecy community is, well, Russian gas is effectively shut off to Europe. They've closed down the Ukrainian pipelines. Russia had closed down Nord Stream 1 back in September. Nothing was going through Nord Stream 1. Nothing ever went through Nord Stream 2. So if you want to put the context of the Biden comments about shutting down Nord Stream 2, they accomplished that back in February. Nothing had ever gone through Nord Stream 2. And that was ultimately Germany's decision. Now, so does that mean we don't have a reason to do it? No, I think there's some things that might say that the United States did this. But I also think I think I could make the case in court, maybe not be a good case, but I think I could make the case in court that there are reasons why Russia might do it. But I think right now I'm kind of leaning that it was the United States that did it. But it does, and I will say this, it doesn't make any sense that we did it. It just shows that we have absolute, completely out of control, insane lunatics in charge. And that means Biden, that means Obama, Susan Rice, Kamala Harris, if she even knows what a pipeline is. It's totally out of it. Makes absolutely no sense. So now people come in and say, well, the hook in the jaw, and that's not really a proper interpretation of Ezekiel 38. It's hooks. I will put hooks in the jaw and drag you back. So now the way I interpret that is that whoever this Gog Magog thing is, the leader of this coalition, and all the countries described are Islamic countries, that whoever the leader is seems to have kind of like sort of withdrawn back to the north and then has to be drugged back in. And it's interesting. And a lot of people think it's Russia. I'm not going to say it's not Russia. I'm not going to say it is Russia. But if it is Russia, Russia's kind of been withdrawing a bit from Syria. And they don't want the Syrian thing to get out of control while they're focused on Ukraine. So a lot of people say, well, the hook, or one of the hooks is Russia will want Israeli gas because now they can't get their gas to Europe. And I don't think that's actually correct. They could get it through Turkey. They could reopen the Ukrainian pipelines, at least right now. And they could get gas there. I don't know that they could get sufficient gas there to replace what's been shut down on Nord Stream. But Nord Stream never produced more than about a third of the gas that Europe was getting from Russia. That's a fact. And I spent hours and hours going through the numbers that I'm going to present to you now. So I'm going to try to make it understandable. So look, everybody says, well, now Russia wants Israeli gas, but let's look at the numbers. So there's two things about Israeli gas to Europe. One is, does Israel have enough gas? And two, do they have a way to get the gas to Europe? And I am saying my conclusion, my analysis, and you can run through my numbers and you can write me a very nice note and say, dear brother Haller, we so appreciate what you do for us, but you're so wrong on this. I'll never listen to you again. I mean, you can say that. That's okay. And I'll continue to go on. But so here's the facts, okay? Total known proven gas reserves. Now, this is kind of difficult because some of the numbers cut off in 2017. Israel's discovered a lot of gas sets. So, for example, if I go to the 2017 numbers, Israel shows up about 49th on the list in gas reserves at about 6 trillion cubic feet. But based on with the recent discoveries of Karish and further development of Leviathan, I think this number, 40 or 41 trillion cubic feet of gas, is a pretty good number. But compare that to Russia. Russia's the biggest gas reserves proven reserves in the world. They have 1,600 trillion cubic feet. That's 1 quadrillion 600 trillion cubic feet, or 1,600 trillion cubic feet. That's what is that, 40 times more than Israel has. So I don't know under the circumstances, my friends, that Russia's going to be going after Israeli gas now. They've got a lot of other problems facing them right now in Ukraine. And I do not think it's going well for them. I think they're in trouble. I think they're flailing. And I know that a lot of them are Kremlin sponsored, paid commentators are going to be on there saying, oh, these people, they don't know. This is Putin's playing chess and he's strategic and they don't understand Russian strategy. And we have the truth, and I've seen these guys talk about it and they're very compelling. But then every now and then they'll say, well, I'm not so sure how much we can say be based on our friends. And that's the people that are paying them to do this. A lot of them are paid by RT and stuff. So they're propagandists. So you can listen to them. You can even believe a lot of what they say, but you have to put the propaganda filter on there and say, maybe they're not telling me everything that I need to know. So, and you could say John Haller hates Russia, doesn't like Russia, doesn't trust Putin. Why should I believe him? And that's true. I don't trust Putin. I think he's he's probably controls more wealth than any person on the planet. And I think he's a narcissist. And I don't know if he's got a blood disorder and dying. I know it's irrelevant to me. I'm looking at what's done, what he does. The Russian military doctrine is to obliterate your enemy. So I was reading an article about a guy who lived in Mariupol. 90% of Mariupol, where they had the big ironworks, one of the largest in the world, is destroyed. It's obliterated. It's estimated that there are above 20,000 civilian deaths in Mariupol. The guy was talking about, I'm walking around. The Russians came to check me because I'm military age. They took me away for a couple of weeks and essentially tortured him. And he had an exemption. He's not in shape to be in the military. Russia's having trouble with this. They called up all these people. Hey, we're going to bring all these people in and we're going to have a 1 million man army. Half the people they called up in the first 300,000 aren't qualified to be in the military. They have knee problems, back problems. They're overweight. They're not strong enough. They can't, they're not qualified. So they've got to send them home. They're not building a 1 million man army anytime soon, in my opinion. I mean, you don't just drag somebody off the street and send them to the front lines unless you want to be sure that you have more casualties. So back to the gas reserves. See, it's so hard to do this because there's all these rabbit trails. So Russia has 1,600 trillion cubic feet of gas. And here's, I don't remember the source of this, worldview meter or something like this. So these are gas reserves. This seems to be relatively current, at least through 2021. And so you see that Russia's really at about 1.7 trillion. That's million cubic feet. 24% of the world supply. Iran has 17% of the world supply. You understand what will happen if Iran gets back into this market with gas, where everybody's desperate for gas? The money that they will get and the mischief that they'll be allowed to do. By the way, while I'm thinking of it, let me talk about Iran for just a second. There's protests all over the country. It might have been Caroline Glick who tweeted just a little while ago about the fact that in some parts of the Iranian protests, the army is refusing to do what the Iranian government wants to do. And understand how the Iranian government works. The Iranian government is, so I'm not criticizing Iranian people. We love Iranian people. We want them to come to know Jesus. Their regime is evil, pure evil. They run like the mafia. They have portfolios, you get the Bronx and you get Brooklyn and you get the gaming and you get the prostitution and that type of thing. And we don't sell anything to children. You remember from that great movie, The Godfather, which was fairly accurate. So Iran, they're having protests all over. And now I was watching videos before I did this where the Iranian Revolutionary Guard is rolling into the streets of Tehran to put down these protests. I got a very nice email from someone I cannot identify who lived in Iran, who understands Iran, and was telling me that they've done surveys, sort of clandestine surveys, and the people in Iran hate the regime. They want to get rid of the regime. But what the Iranian government has done is they've sort of set up these almost protection type rackets. So everybody gets a portfolio to manage, and through that portfolio that they manage, they fund their operations, they fund terror acts, they fund military units, and they kind of work together, but it's very much a mafia type organization. So, for example, within the Iranian government today, the Ayatollah Khamenei, and my understanding is he lives a very modest lifestyle, but he controls a fortune of somewhere around $100 billion. I mean, that's Bill Gates' territory. And we know that Bill Gates does a lot of things we don't like with his $100 billion and his foundation and everything. So put someone in charge of $100 billion, or it may be $125 billion by some estimates that I've seen, who believes that I will bring about the end of days, and the apocalypse and the arrival of the Mahdi is dependent on me creating chaos in the world. That's what's going on with Iran. The Shia Islam believes they can bring about the end times by causing chaos. So now there's people that are protesting against this. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps controls tens of billions of dollars in assets to fund their operations. And as long as they do what the Ayatollah wants and the ruling council, they're allowed to control that. So Soleimani, he didn't live a lavish lifestyle. I mean, the only thing I know is he had a big ring that's how they identified what was left of his body in January of 2020 when President Trump directed him to be taken out. He controlled a vast fortune. So now in Iran, you got all this turmoil going on, and the people I've communicated with in Iran and others that have, well, I can't go into it because it would put people's lives at risk. You just need to, there are believers in Iran. You need to pray for them. I played a clip recently. I know that clip's been taken down a lot on social media about the Iranian church warning to America, like the parallels of what has happened to us is happening to you. And you, church, you need to get ready for persecution and that sort of thing. Totally true. So anyway, so back to my slide here, where I talk about the gas reserves. So now understand that the world has a lot of gas. So here's a example. So every year they find more gas, and the world uses more natural gas. And this is not changing anytime soon. There's all this nonsense that comes out of the White House and the Greens and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and all these. It's just total nonsense. The world's not getting off gas and hydrocarbons and coal and anything anytime soon. The Lord made a wonderful planet, and the planet can survive puny man, I guess is the best way that I can say it. But consumption of gas each year is about 2% of proven reserves, less than 2%. So as the consumption goes up, the discovery goes up, and it seems to balance out. And it seems like there's a process in the earth that's creating this gas. The Lord made a very wonderful, sustainable planet. Okay, so now let's say, so everybody's saying, well, Russia wants Israel's gas, so they need to replace this. So I did all of this stuff. Right now, there's no pipeline to get Israeli gas to Europe. They pipe some of it, a little bit of it, down to Egypt, where it is turned into liquefied natural gas, LNG. And I did all these conversion things, and I could really get into the weeds of how all of this works. But you need to understand that if there's going to be Israel's going to get the gas to Europe, they need to convert it to LNG. And you can see that some of the numbers that I've worked, but here's the problem. Right now, there are 641 LNG tankers on planet Earth. 641. about what a lot of car dealers used to have back in the days when new car dealers had new cars on their lots. Some of them would have 600 cars. Okay, so 600 of these tankers, and a tanker can carry enough to for the power and gas needs of about 47,000 homes on an annual. 47,000 homes. This tanker could transport enough natural gas from one place to another to take care of the needs of 47, let's call it 50,000 homes. Amazing. But it's an expensive process. You got to lower the temperature. I think it's 160 degrees below zero. Got to convert it to liquid, put it in these insulated tankers, ship it across the ocean, and then reverse the process and convert it back to gas on the other end. It increases the gas delivery cost by a factor of 4 or 5 times. And there's only 640 of these in the world. And you can see that about 286 LNG carriers are on order globally until 2028, with 165 ships slated for delivery over 2024, 2025. So here's the problem with Israeli gas to Europe by LNG. It has to be converted to LNG. It takes a while to build those LNG facilities. You don't build them overnight. So I'm saying, I'm not doubting for a moment that Israel could satisfy the gas needs of Europe if they had the capacity to ship things there. That's all that I'm saying. Eventually they will get there. They're trying to develop LNG facilities. But this is interesting right now is that so what are Israel's the gas needs of Europe? So right now, over the last few years, and this would probably continue for a while, Israel's 40% of the 40% of the EU's gas comes from Russia. That's about 155 billion cubic meters a year. So that's billion cubic meters. Israel gas reserves are 40 trillion cubic feet. So easily 155 billion would be a small part of this. And Israel could replace Russia gas if they had the ability to get it to Europe through these tankers. Okay. But here's the problem. Right now, they're limited to Egypt. Egypt can produces about on its own 4.8 billion cubic feet per day gas. They can convert 1.6 billion cubic feet per day to liquefied natural gas. So they have limited facilities. But if you multiply 1.6, but that's Egypt can do. And Egypt has contracts and that type of thing. So they can't get all of that. Israel can't get its hands on all that capacity. But Israel could build these facilities and bring them online within a couple of years. I think that's possible. And I think that's the goal. And I think they're working on that. So in a couple of years, yeah, this would be a problem for Russia, but it's not really. I just disagree with all my friends. It's not logistically feasible right now for Israel to replace Russian gas. Theoretically, yes, but logistically, the real world, I don't think they're going to be able to do it. So what that means to me is that if this gas oil thing is the hook in the jaw, we're not there yet. We're at least a couple years away. These ships, by the way, there's an article I got from a friend today. Keith, didn't you send that to me? I saw it on a forum someplace, and I don't remember which one. Keith, if I don't know if Keith is listening, he knows who he is. But anyway, so these ships, these LNG ships, right now are in short supply. What happens in the era of supply and demand? those ships, the price of shipping gas goes up. So right now, those ships are going for this number is just crazy. The cost of shipping your gas on a ship like this is up to $500,000 per day. And the people in the industry think it's going to reach $1 million a day soon. So if it takes a ship like this 10 days to get from Israel to Europe and unloaded, that could be $10 million cost. 5 days would be $5 million. Now, the ship, though, might bring in revenue. The ship load of gas would bring in revenue of about $200 million. So what do they care if it's 500,000 or $1 million a day? But I'm just telling you is this, the fact that that price is going up so quickly indicates to me that there's a real shortage of these ships, which means that it's less likely that Israel's going to be able to get enough ships, even if they have the LNG facilities. You got to build these ships over the next couple of years. And you saw they're only talking about delivering a couple hundred by 265 new ships by 2028. So I'm just thinking, yeah, I think the gas thing could be the hook in the jaw, but I'm not sure that it is, or one of the hooks in the jaw. I just don't think we're there. And you can hate on me for saying that. I think eventually it will be, but right now, I think it's sort of like I said, that Israel's going to replace Russian gas right now is a pipe dream, and I use that term intentionally. So that's there's our friend Erdogan, and he's interfering now. He's trying to get involved. This is kind of interesting. This is The Economist. Talked about this. Boom time in the Gulf. Winners from the world's turmoil. Oh, who's winning? Well, Russia's making a lot of money. The Saudis are making a lot of money. And here is an artist representation of the line. You see the boats parked here at their berths. It's in this area. And it's interesting that the line crosses. You can see here where the line goes. And this is the area of what a lot of people, myself included, believe is the biblical Mount Sinai in this range here. And there's another map that I have where it calls Google. If you look it up on Google Maps, it calls it the. Let's see. Well, maybe I can pull up Google Maps here and we can see what it calls it. Hang on, let me switch over. By the way, let me know if you like me doing the web browser thing rather than slides. And if you don't like it, we don't want to hear from you. Ha ha ha. So let me go to Google Maps. And we'll do Jebel Al Laws in Saudi Arabia. Do this out. There's some place it says it's like the Mount Sinai of biblical times is the way that they've done this. So this is what some people, Bob Cornuke and others, think is the biblical Mount Sinai, and I kind of agree with it. Don't agree with Cornuke on the Temple Mount. Don't get me started on that. I think that's a theory that we should consign to the annals of history. I just don't think it's a good one. So anyway, so here the line would be this area down here to the southern part. And then, of course, Jordan is right here. Egypt is here. And then this is where Israel, Jordan, Egypt, Israel, and Jordan all come together there at Israeli city of Eilat, right there at Aqaba, Jordan. Okay, so let me there was something else I wanted to talk about. So let me Well, this really requires its whole own presentation. Here's another, by the way, here's another picture of artist rendering of Neom. This is the Red Sea out here. You can see Egypt and some of these islands, and these were involved in some recent negotiations with Israel. And this is sort of the interior representation. You see how it sort of has that Hanging Gardens of Babylon thing. Let me talk briefly about this, because this is kind of important. This is Vladimir Putin at his desk. This is a editorial cartoon from the Financial Times. You can see the article here. Putin's nuclear threats cannot be ignored. And this is I thought it's a good editorial cartoon. Kind of represented, very indicative of what's going on. He's threatened nuclear war. Today or yesterday, they moved what's described as a nuclear train to a region where they would pick up nuclear weapons, or it has nuclear type weapons on it. Also, the big sub that has the Apocalypse torpedo, that is a nuclear powered torpedo that can roam the earth. It has tremendous firepower capacity, assuming that it works. It could cause, if they did it in the right place, like the Canary Islands, it could cause a huge tidal wave that would hit the east coast of the United States, would be devastating, assuming all that works. That's the theory, that they could cause a landslide and a giant thing. So what happened, and this is from a bunch of articles about this. For example, here's an article from the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. I would recommend, if you want to follow this, that you bookmark this website. They have a lot of good intelligence briefings. And here is one. This comes from back in mid-September. This was a analysis of a new thing that had come into place in Russia. And what had happened in Russia was that back on July 31st in St. Petersburg, and you see the imagery that's there looking over this palace in St. Petersburg, where Putin signs the new Russian military naval doctrine. Their last naval doctrine was in 2015, and it lays out what they expect to happen. And the thing that's interesting about this is that the naval doctrine that Putin signed on July 31st is here you see the Russian defense minister, Shoigu, and some of the other guys in charge of the Russian military. Here's Putin signing the document, and here's a cover page of the document, what it looks like. This was a picture of the celebration. And you can see the jets flying by with the Russian flag colors. So there's been a number of articles. This article at the Valdai Discussion Club, that's a Russian think tank. Putin has gone there and talked about Russian nuclear doctrine and that type of thing about 4 or 5 years ago. It's the speech where he said, if we're threatened too much and we think we're going to be attacked, we'll use nuclear weapons. And you guys in the West will go to hell and we'll go to paradise. So we're ready to do that. So the new naval doctrine of Russia, the new naval doctrine is strikingly different from the 2015 edition. The world described in it seems much more disturbing and dangerous. Its potential for conflict has increased significantly, Valdai Club expert writes. I mean, it's interesting, the sort of the apocalyptic language, the things that we talk about all of us talk about on our prophecy updates and news updates. The language that they're using is very similar to this. The Middle East MES Insights wrote an article back in August, Russia's new maritime doctrine, and they have some interesting quotes in there. There's the doctrine again. But look at what this analysis of the naval doctrine says, and then sort of layer it on top of what we've been talking about with regard to the Baltic Sea and all of the conflicts in the world and what Russia is doing and what Russia is focused on. So this article will first prove the evolutionary geopolitical context of Russia's maritime doctrine. In effect, Russia now, how In fact, how Russia interprets the origins and practices of contemporary strategic naval competition. It will then focus on the role that Russian civilian and military leadership believe that their southern sector, roughly speaking, now this is where it gets kind of interesting when you're talking about Bible prophecy and where Russia is focused. Essentially, what it says is Russia's moving away from the Baltic because it's closed in, it's hard to get in and out of, and they do have a port there, but they got those narrow straits to get out to the ocean. The North Atlantic, NATO's taken that all over. And so Russia's going to change the focus on their southern vector, roughly speaking, the area covered by the Black Sea, that's Ukraine, Russia, Crimean Peninsula, Romania's over here on the east. I think Bulgaria also, Turkey on the south. You got the Bosporus, you got the Straits of Dardanelles outlet that's controlled by Turkey. The Sea of Azov, that's the Azov battalions, the people call them the neo-Nazis in Ukraine. They get their name, the Sea of Azov. But then look at what's important. The Eastern Mediterranean Sea, Red Sea, Caspian Sea, and Indian Ocean will play in international politics. Here's the quote. As Russia's maritime doctrine tacitly acknowledges NATO domination of the Atlantic Ocean, and quietly demotes the Baltic Sea from its previous status as a priority area, likely in light of Finland and Sweden's impending admission to NATO. And by the way, new pipeline from like Norway pipeline down through Sweden, Denmark, across the Baltic to Poland for gas. Now, it's not going to replace all the Russian gas, okay, but it's there. And it's going through the Baltic, and it just opened like the day that the other pipelines got blown up. There were 2 explosions in one area, and about 100 miles away, there was another one to take out those 3 pipes. And then a 4th leak was discovered. So anyway, this Russia, Finland and Sweden's impending admission to NATO, which will leave the northern European body of water almost totally dominated by NATO states. The southern vector joins the northern vector of the Arctic Ocean and northern sea route, and the eastern vector of the Pacific Ocean as Russia's main naval areas of concern and focus. And so you can read this article. It goes into a lot of detail. Now back to the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. And I'll just share you a couple quotes. And I think I'll finish with that because I have so much stuff I could go, like I said, I could go 12 hours, and you don't want to listen to all that. And somebody remind me at the end to tell you where you can listen to me some more this week if you're so inclined to do that. So here's this article. This is Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Rakov, who's a Russian expert, former IDF, and he's writing for this institute. They do pretty good work. The revised text emphasizes worldwide conflict with the West, the primacy of the security prism in defining national goals, and reorienting Russia's foreign policy toward the global South in the aftermath of the invasion of Ukraine. That's very interesting language in light of what we read about this conflict between North and South in Bible prophecy. I'm just saying this is what it says. The 2022 document demonstrates Russia's growing willingness to use military means to advance its aims. The Kremlin plans to improve its Navy combat capabilities by considerably expanding its littoral infrastructure, boosting its visibility and frequency on the high seas. To that end, the new doctrine asks for a complete restructuring of Russia's shipbuilding industry, including a qualitative increase in its technological and production capacities in both military and civilian domains, and the ability to produce aircraft carriers. Russia has 1 aircraft carrier. The United States has effectively, one aircraft carrier that needs its own tugboats because it always breaks down. It's not effective. I mean, the United States has like 14, 15, depending on how you count them. We have more aircraft carriers than the rest of the world combined, I think. China's building some. I know the UK just put another one in service. I think it's the Queen Elizabeth aircraft carrier about, I think, just last year. But the United States still has the most aircraft carriers. And Russia doesn't have much of a shipbuilding industry in many respects. They do a great job. They have phenomenal subs, probably the best submarine fleet in the world. And they're nuclear, and it's hard for us to find them and that type of thing. Go watch The Hunt for Red October. It's a great movie. But a lot of their shipbuilding had been done in Ukraine for many years. And so they've never really been able to replace that. So here we go with this. In terms of energy, the doctrine calls for the revitalization of the seabed exploration and the production of fossil fuels. The 2015 text called for a strategic reserve of geologically studied areas. The absence of a similar clause in 2022 underscores Russia's concentration on maximizing hydrocarbon extraction in the coming years, worried that climate change agenda will limit future export opportunities. Now, my interpretation of this, which would relate, I think, in some respect, to the Ezekiel 38 scenario that a lot of people are speculating about now, that Russia might want Israeli gas, is because time's short on some of these things. There's a shelf life that world leaders are seeing with respect to energy production. So that would play into the scenario too. So I'm not totally dismissing the scenario. I'm just saying it's got a short shelf life, and we have all these things converging at once, which are kind of interesting. So let's see here. Okay, somebody asked a question, so I'll try to cover this, and then I'll look at a couple other questions, and I'll try to see what happens. So somebody asked if I discussed this. I did talk about this on Sunday a little bit, I think. these covers that you get from The Economist, The World in whatever year, so 2014. It's sort of their prediction. These are the economic elites. It's I think it's a Rothschild family owned publication if you strip back all the ownership layers, and they sort of predict what's going to happen. And they have these kind of interesting covers, and so you can kind of go back and see what so they show the rise, the big panda, see the panda being strong, and Putin's always there. Here you got Obama, Xi, Angela Merkel. She's always got that sort of symbol she makes with her hands. 2016 was kind of interesting. The world in 2016, they really didn't hear Donald Trump won the election. They had Hillary, but not Trump. Okay, they had the Pope, and they had the Greek or Russian Orthodox head back here, or Greek Orthodox. I think that's the Russian guy. And in 2017, everything changed because it was Trump, and so they had all these sort of tarot type cards on the cover, the Tower, Judgment. You can see who's there, sort of sitting on top of the world. You had the world, and you have these symbolic, all these different little symbols, and these all mean something. I did some shows back in 2016 with some people, some friends who I don't remember where it was, but we talked about what we thought that these might mean. The Hermit, disruption, then you have the Death card, nuclear, and then you have this sort of a composite of one of the horsemen of the apocalypse. Then you have the Magician, that's virtual reality, putting out this stuff in 3D. Some of this stuff is a little bit more forward looking. Then you have the Star. 2018, they kind of went to the symbols, like the apps. 2019, they had an interesting cover, and everything on the cover in words below 2019 was reversed. So you had to really look. So the person who sent me a question, you had to look at it in a reverse mirror image. So here's what it looks like. If you looked at it in a mirror, this is what you would see. And you have a couple of interesting things. You have the sort of the bark, see how the baby's being delivered with the digital identity thing? Have we seen some things about that over the last 3 years? Yeah, big time. And then there was this one. You have the panda, you have Putin, and then you have this thing here above the stork. You have the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And if you look at that mirror image of that, you get Putin's pipelines. So back in 2019, The Economist was thinking, well, this Putin's pipelines thing is a big deal. So, and then they have the world in 2020, and you can find the words in this thing, like you have Trump, and then you have Brexit, and then, but then you could also call it Trump exit, Kyoto, climate, vision, war, Russia, diversity. You can pull all the words out of it. So kind of interesting. Then 2021, it turned it into like a casino. And so here's Biden, here's the mask, here's that treatment for Charlie Vector, windmills, video, markets going up. And you have this Charlie Vector thing, you have China. So it's very interesting. And so what it is the world's in a casino, and it's now everything is a game of chance. Very interesting. So look, let me finish with this. I'm going to recommend a video. If I remember, I'll put it in the show notes and description. I appreciate you all hanging in there for this time. I hope you found that this is I'll put a link in the video. There's a channel. You can find guys. You can find the pro Russian guys like the Duran and some other guys, and listen to them. I listen to them, but I always filter it through like who's paying them. There's a channel that somebody sent to me. A friend in Minnesota sent to me today from a guy called Will Carroll, and I think if you go to YouTube and you type in, let me see if I can find it here. Here we go. Here's the video that I was gonna think about. So here's the video. It's a guy named Will Carroll. Would Putin really use nukes in Iran? Ward Carroll. I'm sorry, Ward Carroll. So go there and look up, would Putin really use nukes in Iran? And near the end of that video, he's got this young English guy named Justin Bronk, and they have a very good analysis of whether Putin would use nukes in Ukraine. So let me just sort of summarize what I think they said, because I listened to it a few hours ago, and I started to make notes, and I've got 80 pages of notes here. So what Justin said was Russia's not doing well. Russian reports from their own Ministry of Finance, they are making payments out to people that are KIA, Russian soldiers that are KIA, that's killed in action. The documents that he saw shows that they have paid out 48,000 KIA payments. That was as of a couple months ago. He thinks the number is probably closer to 60 to 65,000. That means 65,000 Russian soldiers killed in action. A lot of them are leaders. And so now they're bringing in all of these people, but the armies, they need the military trained guys in Ukraine. So Putin says, well, I'm calling up 300,000. I'm going to call up 1 million, and we're going to do all this. This takes time, just like it takes time to get Israeli gas to Europe. It takes time to build an army. You can't take somebody off the street and put them on the front lines unless you're figuring on in upping your killed in action numbers pretty quickly. Russia has a demographic problem. They don't have a huge block of men, military age, that are in shape and sufficient to serve, that they can draw from. They have limited resources there, and they're bogged down. Ukraine is making advances. They seem to be successful. Now, the pro-Russia people say, well, that just means that Russia's plan is working. Everybody thinks that Russia is losing. I'm just telling you, I'm trying to look at it objectively. It does not look like it's going that well for Russia. So if you go to another website, let me pull it up here. It's called the Institute for the Study of War, which I think gives you about the best Institute for the Study of War. So they have a thing here. They have a Russian map, interactive map for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And I'll go here and I'll blow it up. And you can see here's what they think is going on in Russia. Great map. So the yellow areas are areas of advance by Ukraine, and the red lines are what Russia seems to control. So this is very interesting. Right now, there's been some advances by Ukraine in this area. This was not expected. This is kind of a surprise. So now the question is Russia going to use nukes? So they've got really two choices on nukes. They could try to nuke the Ukrainian offensive advance with tactical nukes, but that carries with it radiation clouds. And if they do that, they have a problem because the way the winds blow, the radiation is soon going, the prevailing winds, I think, go to the west. So they're going to have all these NATO countries hit by radiation. Is that an attack on NATO? Some people would say that it is. But then the other thing too is the Russians have their soldiers, they have like 30,000 soldiers in this region, I think, in this area at least. Are they going to nuke the Ukrainians with their soldiers right nearby? That doesn't make any sense. I think Putin can be termed a madman, but I don't think he's that crazy. So it's kind of interesting. They could take out Kyiv, but if they take out Kyiv, just like Chernobyl, which is located somewhere up around here, I believe. So when Chernobyl blew up, they had radiation problems going into Europe. And that would sort of galvanize the European and American opposition to what's going on. And so this guy from the Ward Carroll program, he says this Justin guy, whoops, let me back up here. This Justin guy that speaks a lot at the end. Look at the last 25 minutes. This is what you should listen to. So he's talking and he says, Russia's not beating Ukraine, beating them into submission, and they're only being funded and supplied weapons. And now they're getting some of these HIMAR weapons that are better at killing people than they are taking out tanks. So Ukraine's been adapting its tactics. I don't know that they'll prevail ultimately, but Russia's obliterating Ukraine. And so you have this I just think it's a problem. And so you look at the logistics. So here's the Baltic, you see the Baltic Sea up here. And Nord Stream comes from up here, goes down through the Baltic Sea. It's about 700 miles. It's not as deep as the East Med pipeline, and it's only about half as long. And so it took 5 years to build that. So how quick do you think the East Med pipeline is going to get built? And it's a much shallower depth than the East Med pipeline would be. So anyway, I hope that explains a few things. I don't know that Russia's going to use nuke. There's a lot of bluster. There's a lot of showmanship that's involved in this. I have friends who think that Russia's going to nuke the U.S. Could be. Maybe that's what happens. But I think there would be a retaliation strike. This is a very volatile world right now. I sleep well because I know where I'm going if I'm out of here. And you ought to make sure your friends know the reason. So I think some people think they'll try. I don't know. I think that you're going to see the other thing that this English guy on Ward Carroll's program talked about is, so what if Russia uses tactical nukes and they don't work that well? I mean, these really don't have battlefield testing. They're not tested in the kind of conditions. They're usually desert, underground. You know, even our testing of that doesn't necessarily represent battlefield conditions. So I don't know. I'm skeptical that he'll use them. He might. I mean, it's his trump card. But if he tries and it doesn't work, certainly if he tries, and even if he fails, Russia is a pariah state for the rest of time. Nobody will trust them. And so how this plays out exactly, I don't know. I think it's something to bear watching. So I'll try to do a couple questions. So I don't know what Monkey Works thinks. I haven't seen him. Listen, I could make the case that Russia has some legal reasons for why they would have taken out those pipelines. I don't know that they're that strong. The evidence right now seems to indicate that the U.S. did it. And I'm saying if the U.S. did it, we have absolute lunatics in charge of our country. That's the problem. So, well, I would define a pariah state as somebody that tries to nuke the rest of the world, get the world involved in a nuclear war. That's how the rest of the world will treat it. I have very little respect for the Russian government. They're a bunch of corrupt oligarchs. In that sense, they're very similar to the U.S. So anyway, any quick questions? I'll stay on here for another minute and see. I have not been following questions. Let me see if I've got any in from our moderator. And let's see here. Question. Do you think that Jeremiah 49 to 51 is talking about America? I have friends, Doug Woodward, Dee McGriff, and Doug Krieger, who wrote a book about America, Babylon, thinking America is Babylon, in Jeremiah 49 to 51. I think that you could make that case. I'm not sure that it is. What I do is I sort of put, sort of like.
Interesting question.
Yeah, that's Siri talking to me. I used to represent doctors in medical malpractice cases. And so sometimes we would have a case involving a misdiagnosis. And one of the things that I would spend a lot of time at the medical library and with doctors and stuff, learning about how they make their decisions and analyze problems. And they have these decision trees. If this is, then this, if this, this, if this and this, then this and this. And it's a very logical way that they go through it. And we all apply these decision trees. For example, I'm not referring to my wife, of course, but sometimes a wife thinks that because their husband doesn't clean out the trunk of their car, that the end of civilization is near. And some would say, look at what's happened with COVID. Nobody's been cleaning out their trunk, and it looks like the end of civilization is near. So there seems to be some proximate cause. But so I sort of look at prophecy the same way, these decision trees where, yeah, this is a possibility. So I need to look at this. And so Jeremiah 49 through 51, America is Babylon. And, I think you can get some traction with it, but I'm not sure that that's the way that it works out. Question, if you agree with this notion as some do, how do you see China losing its relevance during the end days? I think that many countries, as I've said many times, are in demographic decline, very severe demographic collapse. China, Russia, Western Europe, the West largely, even the United States is now falling into that category. There's some countries that seem to be not doing that. The countries in Africa have pretty dramatic demographics. So if you project out to 2100, the growth there will be just, I mean, they'll have cities with over 100 million people. To give it's like 5 cities that'll be close to 100 million people. It's just incredible. Now, will they sustain that growth as they get a little bit more successful? It seems like when countries get successful, the birth rate declines. So in China, the birth rates collapsed. They lost the war on getting people to have more children 2 generations ago. 40 years ago, they were in trouble. Now they're really in trouble. Now, they're not going to be in complete collapse for a little while yet. They still have a lot of people. But the leaders of those countries, like China, know that their time is short. So I think that to the extent that China is part of this 200 million man army from the east, and I know some people don't agree that it's a 200 million man army, and that's fine. That's a possibility of the way it'll work out. But I think they may. I just think that the world's set up for countries in demographic decline to know that we're in trouble. We need to do something to establish and cement our legacy for some time. And so that's why I think that's just one of these convergence things that I talk about all the time. One of the countries, though, that seems to be doing pretty well demographically is Israel. And I think, I don't want to cite her all the time, but Caroline Glick wrote a book a few years back called The Israeli Solution, about the one-state solution. And she, drawing on a lot of the demographic work that's been done by Dr. Yorm Ettinger, a former ambassador to the United States, I think, from Israel, that the Arab populations are in demographic, like a static or decline, and particularly in the Palestinian areas. And that indicates that if Israel just sort of hangs in there, they'll be okay. But the interesting thing in all this, too, is we talk about this two-state solution, and the two-state solution is insane. The Saudi proposal, Israel would never, I don't know if Israel would ever agree to it, but understand that just today, we're talking about Israel resolving the gas problem in the Eastern Mediterranean with Lebanon. And they're giving up a lot of it for nothing. They're not getting anything in return. So if this two-state solution is part of this end time thing, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think they might make a stupid decision on a two-state solution as part of this end time scenario? It could be. It's also interesting. I see a parallel between this Lebanon gas deal and what Israel's agreed to, and sort of what's at the heart of the Abraham Accords, which is an economic development agreement in large part. And now this is sort of an economic agreement too. And we know that this agreement with the Antichrist sort of has a big economic component too. That's where you get the mark of the beast. I'm just saying, I just think I see a lot of converging things. So somebody said, wow, is this still going? Yeah, it's still going. So I'm going to shut it off. I think I've talked enough. So where you can hear me, Friday or Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, at Serpents and Doves Offhand with Pablo. I'm going to do an interview, and we're probably going to do that live. So that's 4 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday on the Serpents and Doves Offhand thing. And we're going to probably talk about some different issues. And we don't agree on end times things. And so just understand that he's not endorsing everything I think, and I'm not endorsing everything he thinks. And then Friday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 Central, I will do I'll be live on Stand Up for the Truth with David Fiorazzo on Q95 FM, Q95fm.com. It's at 10 a.m. Friday, and we'll talk about this. And then I'll, of course, do the thing on Sunday. I'm also doing the sermon first hour on Sunday. So anyway, thanks for listening. And look at that. It was short and brief. I told my wife I was going to be, the term short and brief are relative to a lawyer, especially when I was a lawyer. We used to have these page limits for our brief. And it would be like 25 pages, and we would always file a motion to increase the size of the brief. So brief is a relative term to lawyers. We would like, could we double the number of pages in the brief? And sometimes the judge would let us, and they still called it a brief. So it's a relative term. So anyway, I'm going to end this. Appreciate so much, and we'll see you later. God bless.